On the 2nd of November, the Holbeach fire engine was sent to a fire on land rented by the Bowed Farming Company at Holbeach Clough. It was reported to the Environment Agency as commercial waste was being burnt. 2 firemen were to remove a good tyre from the fire, previously from a stand and beat harvester belonging to Mr. Pole. The skid unit had been sold by the bailiffs in March for scrap. On the field was some wheat which had been removed from the shed. It had been spread. Then peat, formerly used for forcing daffodils, spread on top to try to cover it up. Mr. Pole had not been to the farm to remove it, as the last time he had visited the farm he had been pursued from it, which had left him shaken and unable to sleep. Mr. Pole had been down to London to the Crown Estate's offices and then was told to put matters in writing, which he did do, but they appear to have just let the agents carry on. When Part 8 was done, The Winter of Discontent, it was sent to the Crown Estate offices, and they was asked, as they were saying they did not own the roadway, why did Tim Jones write a letter saying they did? And as the plan said it was Plan A, could they send a copy of Plan B, please? And would they send this to the Parish Council offices? At the Holbeach Parish Council meeting of the 8th of November, Mr. Pole asked in the open forum if anything had been received from the Crown Estate. The answer was no. The Crown had served notice for Mr. Pole to quit the farm on the grounds of unpaid rent. He had in 2008 paid rent, but although received by the Crown, it took several telephone calls to Tim Jones as to why the cheque had not been cashed. With the vandalism affecting Mr. Pole's health, it was getting to the point that he could not farm the farm, let alone pay the rent. With the fires of 2008, he decided to retrain to fit LPG kits to cars. He should have left the farm in October 2009, but Richard Bramley did not come and negotiate. When he did come, he claimed the glass houses were worth nothing, and all the other improvements, including the big barn, were worth only £11,000. Mr. Pole did not agree. The farm had been a model farm up to the fence being erected, and the campaign of vandalism and arson commencing. At one point, machinery was parked on the field to deter such activity, but it did not spare a combine, which was ultimately scrapped. Once the machines were back in the yard, it was arsoned. Along with the boxes lost, other items, including a sprayer, bulb harvesters, and a beet harvester bought new by the previous farmer, used by Mr. Pole when he used to work for him, a vintage item. The amount of water used by the emergency services made it difficult to get the wheat removed from the shed and sold, while youths burnt bales and fetched items from the farm to build dens at the park. The council were not willing to secure the park's boundaries, so crops continued to be damaged. In 2008, wire taken from the yard was placed in the wheat to damage the combine of the contractor. Several complaints were made to the police. On one occasion, with the complaint went photographs and the names of 2 witnesses. A few weeks later, a letter arrived stating that the crime would be recorded as undetected, as all lines of investigation had been exhausted. But the 2 witnesses had never been interviewed. But he was offered stone for the yard when he tried to solve the water problem in the grain store. But the Bowed Farming Company received concrete, and when the back door failed in the autumn of 2008, all it received was a black cross in 2009. The Bowed Farming Company took over Mr. Pole's farm business tenancy, and Mr. Pole planned a farm sale. In March, bailiffs arrived at number 3. First to go was the cars, some with new gaskets fitted, £50 each, apparently scrap. But one, a few days later, was sold by a dealer in Holbeach. Then the bulb equipment, and some items burnt on the premises. And working with the bailiffs, Mr. Bowd. The premises were virtually cleared, leaving Mr. Pole with no tools for his new trade, or to lift the daffodils left in the land, which the tenancy finished in October 2010, or on the allotment. Mr. Pole's feelings were that this was done to break him. No farm, no machinery, unable to farm the allotments, the fence could be covered up. A feelings which could only be supported by the letters to the parish council from the Crown Estate. In June, he tried to approach Mr. Bowd at Chandler's, Holbeach, but he sped off. Mr. Pole was to memo this in his mobile phone. A few days later, persons went to remove some of Mr. Pole's items on his behalf from the farm, but Mr. Bowd told them to get off as they were trespassing. It then emerged he had been riding around with the bailiff again. In March, the bailiff said they could not touch 8 Sluice Road, but they went ahead and sold the teleporter that was there. Mr. Pole thought, yes, that's so I cannot move anything. Previously, Mr. Bowd had said it didn't matter about the machinery being at number 8. It could wait until the land got dry for it to be moved and put out for a sale. But that was when he was trying to get Mr. Pole to let him have number 3 Sluice Road to farm in 2010. Once the bailiffs moved in, he cut the hedge down and dropped it onto Mr. Pole's machinery, left at number 8. The farm had a large acreage of daffodils. The last time of lifting, the bulbs had gone back into the field due to lack of buyers. Standing up against Nick Worth was not good when he was supported by one of the biggest garden centre suppliers of bulbs. In 2009, Councillor Worth stood for County Councillor as a Tory. Had one of his signs in Taylor's Farms, Wheatfield. David Cameron, leader of the Tory party, was written to and asked if he was serious about cleaning up politics, and if so, how could Councillor Worth be representing the Tories? Neither letter was replied to. Some of Mr. Pole's holding had been farmed previously by Mr. Ayton, and it was Mr. Ayton who Mr. Pole Sr. worked for when he moved to 3 Sluice Road in 1964. Paul used to help Mr. Ayton, and when he decided to pack up daffodil growing, was to offer him some daffodils in exchange for removing them from his glasshouse, and was to let Paul some land to grow them on, as he wished for them to remain with the farm. Mr. Pole was to grow the small stock on, but upon losing the farm business tenancy, the bulbs were to fall in the hands of the Bowd Farming Company, along with other varieties, which were then sold to Taylor's Bulbs. So the problem could not have been with the bulbs, but the grower. And it was to come back to Mr. Pole that Mr. Bowd had had such a good deal. He had hired in machines, and one day paid out £700 for gang labour, who had hand-picked 8 pallet boxes, which Taylor's Bulbs had paid £500 a box for. That bridal crown was a good earner. But Mr. Pole did not grow bridal crown.